The whispers followed Fiona Fletcher across the crowded dance floor of the Silver Dollar Saloon, as surely as her shadow on a sunny day. At 32, she'd heard it all before too old, too independent, too stubborn words that stung like desert sand in a windstorm but had long since ceased to make her flinch. The year was 1885, and in the small but growing town of Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, a woman her age without a husband might as well have been wearing a sign declaring herself a spinster. Fiona tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and straightened her spine, ignoring the pitying glances from the younger women who fluttered around the eligible bachelors like butterflies to wildflowers. Her eyes swept across the room, not searching for anything in particular, just observing the revelry that accompanied the town's annual Founders' Day celebration. "Miss Fletcher," Mrs. Holloway said, approaching with her daughter in tow, "have you met my Bess? She's just turned 18 and already has 3 suitors vying for her hand." Fiona offered a polite smile. "How wonderful for her." "Yes, well, one must secure these things while youth is still on one's side," Mrs. Holloway replied, her meaning unmistakable. "I'll keep that in mind," Fiona replied dryly, excusing herself to fetch a cup of punch. At the refreshment table, she found a moment's peace, watching the townspeople swirl about in their finery. 6 years ago, she'd arrived in Cottonwood Springs to take over her uncle's general store after his passing. The business thrived under her capable hands, but that seemed to matter little to those who believed a woman's sole purpose was to marry and bear children. "Mighty fine party," came a deep voice beside her. Fiona turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sandy blonde hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. She recognized him immediately as Yates Rawlins, the rancher who'd bought the old McAllister place last month. He'd been into her store once or twice, but they'd never formally met. "It is," she agreed, "if you enjoy watching the same people do the same dance to the same music year after year." Yates laughed, a warm sound that seemed to come from deep in his chest. "Not one for tradition, miss." "Fletcher, Fiona Fletcher, and traditions are fine, Mr. Rollins. It's expectations I find tiresome." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You know my name. It's my business to know everyone who might need supplies. You've got the largest spread outside of town now." "Guilty as charged," he said with a grin. "Though I'm surprised a lady as pretty as yourself is standing here alone instead of dancing." Before Fiona could respond, Mrs. Holloway reappeared. "Mr. Rollins, I've been hoping to introduce you to my daughter, Bess. She's a marvelous dancer and so young and full of life." Fiona saw something flash in Yates's eyes, annoyance, perhaps before he politely tipped his hat to Mrs. Holloway. "I'm sure she is, madam, but I've just asked Miss Fletcher for this dance." He turned to Fiona, extending his hand. "If you do me the honor." Surprised but not displeased, Fiona placed her hand in his. "I suppose I could make an exception to my no dancing policy." As he led her onto the floor, the whispers followed, but for once, Fiona didn't care. There was something about the way Yates held her respectfully but confidently that made her feel both safe and exhilarated. "You saved me from an introduction I wasn't seeking," he said as they began to move with the music. "I'm in your debt. And you saved me from more pitying glances and not so subtle remarks about my advancing age. I believe we're even?" Yates looked puzzled. "Your what?" "My advancing age," Fiona repeated. "Surely you've heard the whispers. Poor Fiona Fletcher, 32 and still unwed. What a shame." Yates's laugh surprised her. 32? Why, you're just getting started, Miss Fletcher." "Not according to the good people of Cottonwood Springs." His eyes held hers, serious now. "Then the good people of Cottonwood Springs are fools." The music ended too soon, and Yates reluctantly released her. "Would you allow me to escort you home, Miss Fletcher?" Fiona hesitated. That would certainly give them something new to whisper about. "Let them whisper," he said with a shrug. "I find I'm more interested in what you have to say." The night air was crisp as they walked the short distance to her home above the general store. Stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky like diamond dust, and the nearly full moon illuminated their path with silver light. "I bought the McAllister place because I wanted a fresh start," Yates said as they strolled. "Lost my wife to fever 3 years ago in Texas, figured a change of scenery might help." "I'm sorry about your wife," Fiona said softly. "Catherine was a good woman. We were childhood sweethearts." He paused. "What about you? Has there been anyone special?" Fiona shook her head. "I was engaged once back in Boston. He decided he preferred my younger sister." "Fool," Yates said simply, making Fiona smile. When they reached her door, Fiona turned to face him. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Rollins." "Yates, please." "Yates." His name felt good on her lips. "Thank you for the dance as well." "Would you consider having dinner with me tomorrow evening, Fiona?" The question caught her off guard. Yes, I think I would like that." His smile was bright even in the dim light. "Until tomorrow, then." As he walked away, Fiona couldn't help but wonder if perhaps traditions and expectations weren't quite as stifling as she'd believed. The following day, Fiona found herself distracted as she tended to customers in the store. Mrs. Porter needed fabric for a new dress. Mr. Jenkins came for nails to repair his fence, and young Billy Thompson's mother sent him for sugar and flour. All the while, Fiona's thoughts kept drifting to Yates Rawlins and their impending dinner. The bell above the door jingled mid-afternoon, and Fiona looked up to see Eliza Winters, her closest friend in town, hurrying in. "Is it true?" Eliza demanded without preamble. "Did Yates Rawlins really escort you home from the dance last night?" Fiona sighed. "News travels fast." "In Cottonwood Springs, like wildfire in July." Eliza leaned across the counter, lowering her voice. "Mrs. Holloway is positively green with envy. She had her heart set on him for Bess." "Well, he's asked me to dinner tonight," Fiona admitted. Eliza's eyes widened. "Fiona Fletcher. And here you've been telling me for years you had no interest in men." "I said I had no interest in the men of Cottonwood Springs," Fiona corrected. "Yates is different. He's also handsome as sin and owns the biggest ranch in the county," Eliza pointed out with a knowing smile. "That has nothing to do with it," Fiona protested, though she couldn't deny his physical appeal. "Of course not," Eliza teased. "So what will you wear?" The question gave Fiona pause. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of practical clothing suitable for running the store: sturdy skirts, simple blouses, and sensible boots. The blue dress she'd worn to the dance was her finest garment, and she'd just worn it. "I hadn't thought about it," she admitted. "Then it's fortunate I'm here," Eliza declared. "Close up early. We're going to make sure you look perfect tonight." 2 hours later, Fiona stood before her mirror, hardly recognizing herself. Eliza had brought over a lovely forest green dress she'd been saving for a special occasion, insisting it would complement Fiona's auburn hair and fair complexion perfectly. With a few quick alterations, the dress fit as if it had been made for her. "He won't be able to take his eyes off you," Eliza said with satisfaction, putting the finishing touches on Fiona's hair, which she'd arranged in an elegant twist with a few soft tendrils framing her face. Fiona studied her reflection, anxiety fluttering in her stomach. "What am I doing, Eliza?" "I'm not some young girl experiencing her first courtship." "No, you're a woman who knows her own mind," Eliza replied firmly. "Age is just a number, Fiona. It doesn't define who you are or what you deserve." A knock at the door downstairs made both women jump. "He's here," Fiona whispered, suddenly feeling as nervous as a debutante. "Go on," Eliza urged. "I'll slip out the back way." Taking a deep breath, Fiona descended the stairs and opened the door to find Yates standing there in a clean suit, his hat in his hands. His eyes widened appreciatively as he took in her appearance. "Miss Fletcher," he said, his voice slightly husky, "you look absolutely beautiful." Fiona felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Rollins. You clean up rather nicely yourself." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" "I've arranged for us to dine at the hotel restaurant. I hear Mrs. Henderson makes the best apple pie west of the Mississippi." The restaurant was busy, and their entrance caused a stir. Fiona felt the stares and heard the whispers, but with Yates's steady presence beside her, they seemed less important somehow. As they settled at their table, Mrs. Holloway and Bess entered the restaurant. Mrs. Holloway's tight smile did nothing to hide her disapproval as she nodded in their direction. "Don't mind them," Yates said, noticing Fiona's discomfort. "Tell me about your store. How did you come to run it?" Grateful for the distraction, Fiona explained how her uncle had left her the business in his will. "Everyone expected me to sell it and return east, but I'd always loved visiting here as a child. The open sky, the freedom, it called to me." "I understand that call," Yates said. "There's something about the West that gets into your blood." As they enjoyed their meal, conversation flowed easily between them. Yates told her about his ranch in Texas, his plans for the McAllister place, and his love of horses. Fiona shared stories of Boston, her dreams for expanding the store, and her passion for reading. "Catherine wasn't much for books," Yates admitted, "but my mother was a schoolteacher. She instilled in me a love of literature." "What's your favorite?" Fiona asked, delighted to discover this unexpected side of him. "Mark Twain," he replied without hesitation, "though I've developed a fondness for Jane Austen as well, much to my ranch hand's amusement." Fiona laughed, finding herself more and more drawn to this man who defied her expectations at every turn. As Yates walked her home after dinner, the night air cool around them, Fiona realized she hadn't enjoyed herself so much in years. At her door, she found herself reluctant for the evening to end. "I had a wonderful time," she said, "as did I." Yates hesitated, then asked, "Would you allow me to call on you again? I would like that very much." His smile was warm in the lamplight. "Good night, Fiona." "Good night, Yates." As she closed the door behind her, Fiona leaned against it, her heart lighter than it had been in a very long time. Over the next few weeks, Yates became a regular visitor to the general store. Sometimes he came with legitimate supply needs for his ranch, but often he simply stopped by to chat with Fiona, bringing her wildflowers or a book he thought she might enjoy. The townspeople noticed, of course. Some, like Eliza, were supportive and happy for Fiona. Others, particularly those who had daughters of appropriate age, were less pleased. One afternoon, as Fiona was organizing a new shipment of fabric, Mrs. Holloway entered the store with several other ladies from the town's social circle. "Miss Fletcher," Mrs. Holloway said with a thin smile, "we've come to place an order for the church social next month." "Of course," Fiona replied professionally, reaching for her order book. "What will you need?" "Before we discuss that," Mrs. Holloway continued, "we thought it only right to have a word with you about Mr. Rollins." Fiona's hand stilled. "I wasn't aware Mr. Rollins was a topic that concerned the church social committee." "We're concerned for him," Mrs. Garfield, another committee member, interjected. "A widower like that needs a young wife who can give him children at your age." "My age," Fiona repeated, her voice dangerously calm. "Well, dear, you must admit you're past your prime," Mrs. Holloway said. "Mr. Rollins is only 35. He deserves a fresh start with someone who can provide him with a family." Fiona carefully set down her pencil, lest she snap it in two. "I appreciate your concern, ladies, but I believe Mr. Rollins is capable of deciding for himself what he deserves." "We just don't want to see him make a mistake," Mrs. Porter added. "Or you to be disappointed when he inevitably realizes the bell above the door jingled and all heads turned to see Yates himself entering the store." He paused, sensing the tension. "Ladies," he greeted, tipping his hat. "Am I interrupting?" "Not at all," Mrs. Holloway said sweetly. "We were just discussing the church social with Miss Fletcher. And offering some friendly advice," Mrs. Garfield added. Yates's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked from the women to Fiona's flushed face. "I see. Well, don't let me keep you from your business." The women quickly placed their order and departed, leaving Fiona and Yates alone in the store. What kind of friendly advice were they offering? Yates asked once the door closed behind them. Fiona busied herself with straightening items on the counter. "Nothing worth repeating, Fiona." His voice was gentle but insistent. She sighed, meeting his gaze. They were concerned that I'm too old for you, that at 32 I can't give you the family you deserve. Something dark flashed in Yates's eyes. Is that so? It's nothing I haven't heard before, Fiona said, trying to sound dismissive despite the hurt she felt. And they're not entirely wrong. A man in your position would traditionally seek a younger bride. Yates moved closer until only the counter separated them. Do I strike you as a man overly concerned with tradition? The intensity in his blue eyes made Fiona's breath catch. No, she admitted. Good, because I didn't come to Cottonwood Springs looking for a young bride. I came looking for peace and a fresh start. He reached across the counter to take her hand. And since meeting you, I've found something far more valuable. What's that? Fiona asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Hope, he said simply. And I don't give a damn what anyone else thinks about it. The weeks turned into months, and as summer gave way to fall, Fiona and Yates's courtship became the talk of Cottonwood Springs. They rode together on Sundays, exploring the beautiful Arizona landscape. They shared meals and books and long conversations about everything and nothing. And gradually, inevitably, they fell in love. Not everyone approved, but Fiona found herself caring less and less about others' opinions. The happiness she felt with Yates was worth any amount of gossip. One crisp October afternoon, Yates invited Fiona to visit his ranch. Though she'd heard about the improvements he'd made to the old McAllister place, she hadn't yet seen them for herself. As they crested the final hill on horseback, Fiona gasped at the sight before her. The rundown property she remembered had been transformed. The house had been repaired and expanded with a fresh coat of white paint and a new porch wrapping around the front. The barn and corrals were in perfect condition, and cattle grazed contentedly in the distance. Yates, it's beautiful, she breathed as he helped her dismount. Come inside, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice that Fiona found endearing. I want to show you something. The interior of the house was just as impressive as the exterior. Simple but comfortable furniture filled the rooms and large windows let in the golden autumn light. This is the parlor, Yates said, leading her through. And through here is the kitchen. Mrs. Benson comes in 3 times a week to cook and clean, but she's not here today. Fiona noticed his growing agitation as he showed her around. Yates, is everything all right? He ran a hand through his hair. I had a whole speech prepared, but now that you're here, I can't seem to remember a word of it. A speech about what? Instead of answering, he took her hand and led her to a closed door off the main hallway. This room, he said, I've been saving to show you last. He opened the door and Fiona stepped inside, her eyes widening in surprise. The room was filled with bookshelves, floor to ceiling, with a comfortable window seat overlooking the ranch lands. A writing desk sat in one corner and a cozy chair by the fireplace in another. It's a library, she said in wonder, running her fingers along the spines of the books. Many were clearly well loved, but others appeared brand new. I've been collecting them, Yates admitted. Every time I go to Tucson or Phoenix on business, I remember all the ones you've mentioned loving or wanting to read. Fiona turned to him, tears pricking at her eyes. But why? Yates took both her hands in his. Because I built this room for you, Fiona. I built this whole house with you in mind. Every decision, every change, I kept thinking, would Fiona like this? Would this make her happy? Yates. She began, but he shook his head, asking her to let him continue. I know what people say. That you're too old, that I should find someone younger, someone who hasn't established her independence and her own successful business. He smiled ruefully. As if those things weren't exactly what drew me to you in the first place. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Fiona's heart began to race as he dropped to one knee before her. Fiona Fletcher, from the moment we danced at the Founders' Day celebration, I knew you were special. You're smart and strong and kind, and the fact that you've lived enough life to know who you are and what you want is not a drawback, it's a blessing. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a single pearl. Will you marry me? Will you make this house a home with me? Tears flowed freely down Fiona's cheeks now. But what about children? What if I can't, then we'll love each other, Yates said firmly. And if we're blessed with children, we'll love them too, but you, Fiona, you're enough, you're perfect for me. With those words, the last of Fiona's doubts crumbled. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Yates Rawlins, I will marry you. His face broke into a radiant smile as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to pull her into his arms. His kiss was tender and full of promise, sealing their commitment to each other. The news of their engagement spread through Cottonwood Springs like wildfire, eliciting reactions ranging from genuine happiness to poorly concealed disapproval. Fiona and Yates paid little attention to the latter, too caught up in their plans for the future. They decided on a December wedding, small and intimate, with only their closest friends in attendance. Eliza, of course, was thrilled to be Fiona's maid of honor, and Yates's foreman, Henry, agreed to stand as his best man. As the wedding day approached, Fiona found herself busier than ever. Between running the store, preparing to move to the ranch, and wedding preparations, she barely had a moment to breathe. Yet despite the flurry of activity, she had never been happier. 1 week before the wedding, Fiona was closing the store when the door opened, admitting a blast of cold air and Mrs. Holloway. "Miss Fletcher," Mrs. Holloway said stiffly, "I need to speak with you." Suppressing a sigh, Fiona nodded. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Holloway?" The older woman twisted her gloves in her hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I've come to apologize." Of all the things Fiona had expected, an apology was not among them. "I beg your pardon, I was wrong," Mrs. Holloway admitted, "about you and Mr. Rollins. I saw the way he looked at you at the Thanksgiving service last Sunday and, well, it's clear he adores you." Fiona was momentarily speechless. "My Herbert looked at me that way once," Mrs. Holloway continued, a faraway look in her eyes, "before he passed. That kind of love is rare, and I had no right to judge it or to suggest you were unworthy because of your age." "Thank you," Fiona said quietly. "That means a great deal to me." Mrs. Holloway nodded briskly, composure restored. "Yes, well. I also wanted to offer my assistance with the wedding preparations. I understand it's to be a small affair, but even small weddings benefit from experienced hands." Fiona smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I would appreciate that very much." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the winter sun casting a pearly light over the mountains surrounding Cottonwood Springs. The small church was decorated simply but beautifully with evergreen boughs and white ribbons, and a handful of close friends gathered to witness the union. Fiona stood in the church anteroom, Eliza fussing with the train of her ivory satin gown. The dress, ordered from a catalog and altered by Eliza's skilled hands, was elegant without being ostentatious, befitting a bride of Fiona's age and sensibilities. "Are you nervous?" Eliza asked, adjusting the small wreath of holly berries and greenery that crowned Fiona's upswept hair. "Strangely, no," Fiona replied with a serene smile. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The church doors opened, and Fiona walked down the aisle alone, her head held high. She had no father or brother to give her away, but she didn't mind. She was giving herself freely, with full knowledge of her heart and mind. Yates waited at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers as she approached. The love in his gaze was so tangible it seemed to fill the church, warming Fiona from within despite the December chill. As they exchanged their vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all their days, Fiona thought of all the twists and turns that had led her to this moment. The disappointments and rejections, the whispers and judgments, all had brought her here, to this man who saw her not as too old or too independent, but as perfectly, wonderfully herself. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Yates cupped Fiona's face in his hands with infinite tenderness before lowering his lips to hers. The kiss was sweet and reverent, a promise of all the days to come. As they turned to face their friends, now husband and wife, Fiona caught Mrs. Holloway dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even the town's staunchest traditionalist had been won over by the undeniable rightness of their union. The small reception at the hotel was a joyous affair with good food, music, and dancing. Yates never strayed far from Fiona's side, his hand often finding hers as if he couldn't bear to be disconnected from her. "Happy Mrs. Rollins," he murmured in her ear as they swayed to a slow waltz. "Deliriously," she replied, savoring the sound of her new name. "And you, Mr. Rollins." His answer was to pull her closer, his cheek resting against her temple. "I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness again. You've given me more than I dared hope for." Later that night, as Yates carried her over the threshold of their home, Fiona felt a sense of rightness wash over her. The house that Yates had rebuilt with her in mind welcomed her, from the spacious kitchen to the cozy library to the master bedroom with its large four-poster bed. Their coming together as husband and wife was everything Fiona had dreamed it would be: tender and passionate, filled with whispered words of love and the joining of bodies and souls. And afterward, as she lay in Yates's arms, watching the moonlight paint silver patterns on the ceiling, Fiona knew she had found where she belonged. 5 years later, Fiona sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Yates taught their 3-year-old daughter, Catherine, to ride her pony in the yard. Their son, James, not yet a year old, dozed against her breast, his little hand clutching the fabric of her blouse even in sleep. Against all expectations, Fiona had been blessed with children after all. Catherine had arrived a year after their wedding, a strong, healthy girl with her father's blue eyes and her mother's auburn hair. James had followed, completing their family in ways Fiona had once thought impossible. The general store still thrived in town, now managed by a capable young couple, while Fiona oversaw the business aspects from home. She had found a balance that allowed her to be both the independent businesswoman she had always been and the wife and mother she had become. Yates lifted Catherine from the pony and set her on his shoulders, the little girl's delighted laughter floating across the yard. He caught Fiona's eye and smiled, that same smile that had first captured her heart at the Founders' Day dance all those years ago. As they approached the porch, Catherine chattering excitedly about her ride, Fiona thought about the whispers that had once followed her through town. Too old, they had said, past her prime, unable to give a man what he needed. How wrong they had been. Yates climbed the porch steps and settled beside her on the swing, Catherine scrambling down to play with her wooden toys. He slipped an arm around Fiona's shoulders and pressed a kiss to her temple. "What are you thinking about, love?" he asked. "You've got that faraway look." Fiona leaned into his embrace, their sleeping son between them. "I was thinking about how lucky I am, how perfectly everything turned out." Yates's arm tightened around her. "I'm the lucky one," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Every day I thank God that I found you." As the sun began to set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Fiona Rollins closed her eyes and offered up her own silent thanks. For the man beside her who had seen her true worth, for their beautiful children, for second chances and new beginnings. And for the wisdom to know that sometimes, being called too old was simply the universe's way of saving you for the one person who would look into your eyes and say, with absolute conviction, "You're perfect for me."